This edition of AEW Dynamite begins once again with the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley in action against Joey Janela. And this match gets an 83. Another hardcore match which we saw Joey Janela featuring on last week's episode of AEW Dark. The segment getting an 83. That's our best match in AEW so far in this series. Moxley against Janela. Who would have thought? A hardcore match. Again, it's another opportunity for Jon Moxley to prove that he is the fighting champion that AEW deserves. Although saying that, there wasn't much psychology in this match. After the match, Jon Moxley is catching his breath after yet another win in yet another brutal match, when all of a sudden the cameraman that is focusing on him in the ring throws the camera down and then attacks Mox. This cameraman, who has a hat and sunglasses on, is relentless, hammering blows on Moxley over and over. Who is it? Then the cameraman peels off his gloves, revealing the dynamite doesn't ring on his right hand. He then goes to town on Mox again, busting him wide open. The cameraman takes off his hat and sunglasses, revealing MJF with a smirk on his face. He picks up the camera, willing Mox to stand to his feet, then glances it over his head, knocking Moxley out. MJF slaps him a few times with the blood flowing, taunting him. "You like that, huh, Mox? Don't ever underestimate me, you stupid son of a bitch. Look at you. You're ridiculous." MJF walks out with his arms raised, leaving Mox in a pool of his own blood. EMTs run out as we transition to the commentary desk. We are just a week out, remember, from MJF and Mox's match for the AEW Championship at Full Gear, and it just continues to get even more heated between these two, hopefully to coming to or culminate in such an amazing conclusion at Full Gear that we're going to have a fantastic match. Who will come out on top? We will find out. That segment gets an 83. As we move into our next segment, it's with JR, Excalibur and Tony Schiavone. Jon Moxley continues to impress as AEW World Champion, a real fighting champion, kicking tonight's show off with yet another brutal demonstration against the bad boy, Joey Janela. Just a shame MJF has to spoil it. Anyway, welcome everyone once again to AEW Dynamite, and tonight we have a blockbuster of a show for you. We certainly do, JR. Tonight, after overcoming 2/3 of Jurassic Express, Jungle Boy and Marco Stunt last week in that handicap match, the Machine Brian Cage will face Luchasaurus. Tony Schiavone also, gentlemen, CM Punk is here tonight after it was announced by Tony Khan that it's official. He will step into the ring against Cody at Full Gear in 2 weeks' time. Also, I believe Matt and Nick Jackson took up FTR's offer from last week and went to that 5-star spa and relaxation. Let's catch up with them now. This gets a 57. So then let's have a look at tonight's card. Pac will put his TNT Championship on the line against the debuting Warhorse. And also, the Machine Brian Cage steps into the ring to take on Luchasaurus. Also, after it was confirmed last week, CM Punk is here tonight and he will speak ahead of their weigh-in next week. And also up next, the Young Bucks. They're relaxing, you know. We're going to find out how they've got on. So, we see both Matt and Nick Jackson at this swanky 5-star hotel and spa. It's shot in BTE style. They're at a buffet. Matt Jackson goes on to say, "So we thought we'd vlog our time here as our wives and kids are off enjoying themselves. Gotta admit, Cash and Dax really outdid themselves with this." Damn right. I'd much rather enjoy being at Dynamite though, delivering his super kick. Nick Jackson picks up some olives from the counter. No cheap olives here with nothing inside them. They're stuffed. Matt Jackson, not many of you know this, but I've been suffering with my lower back for some time. Just being here, man, it's cleared up. Gotta thank you boys of FTR. Hey, did you ever find out what that stands for, Nick? Was it for the revolution? I don't care, you know why? Because I'm here, of course, unwinding. Matt Jackson looks across the counter. Hey look, they have some bubbly. Nah, bet Hangman wishes he was here. JR, we'll catch up with Nick and Matt a bit later. This gets a 78 rating, so it's been a very strong start to this week's edition of Dynamite. Nice to note that Matt and Nick improvising well with interactions with the crowds after this little segment at this 5-star hotel, and the angle getting the crowd even hotter after that superb match that Jon Moxley put on against Joey Janela. What a way to start Dynamite. I can't stop thinking about that. Up next, Pac put his TNT Championship on the line after officials at TNT told him he has to defend it week in, week out. And he did overcome Warhorse in 11 minutes 18. Warhorse is now All Elite. He is officially a part of the roster. And his power and paint gimmick got an initial rating of very good. Debuting that. So decent match, to be fair. And I know with Pac being in it, it could have been a lot better up towards the 70s. It got 58. But Warhorse, who rolls ass, he's got a bright future ahead of him. So that was defense number 5 of the TNT Championship. After the match, or during the match I should say, Brian Pillman Jr. came out with a steel chair and sat at the top of the entranceway, the best seat in the house. After the match though, Pac begins to carry on beating down Warhorse. Brian Pillman Jr. races down to the ring. Pac slides out. Brian Pillman Jr. hits his head a few times with the chair until he is bleeding. He looks crazy. He helps Warhorse to his feet as Pac walks off, clutching his TNT Championship. So another decent segment rating, including some newbies here on the AEW roster in Brian Pillman Jr. and Warhorse. And speaking of newbies, how about this? A quick promo video is played hyping up 2 of AEW's newest acquisitions to the tag team division, the Von Erichs. VE Nation is here and is All Elite. And they are in action next. So their family tradition gimmick got a very good rating, and the segment rating overall got 41. So really good to see that. Again, promising stuff. 2 young competitors that are only going to get better as time goes on, and the best friends who have been looking for action on Dynamite were in action against the Von Erichs, but I had to put the Von Erichs over on their debut. They defeat the best friends, Marshall with the submission on Trent Beretta, and it's not a bad match actually. I know it's that odd heel-face combination again, 2 faces against one another, but I couldn't quite. I was thinking, who could we put the Von Erichs against? And I thought, well, the best friends. They've been wanting some action on Dynamite after what's been going down over on Dark as of late, and it's not bad. Segment rating of 58. It's again pretty promising for VE Nation. I can't wait to delve more into their story. Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn, Private Party, are backstage talking and looking as though they are waiting for someone. And Isaiah Cassidy says, "You'll be hearing him in." Death Triangle, Pentagon Jr. and Rey Fenix attack from behind with steel chairs, flooring Private Party. They run off quickly as the door at the end of the corridor opens. Hangman Page and Kenny Omega, the tag team champions, appear. Page runs over quickly, really concerned for his friends. He looks over at Kenny and says, "Hey, can you go get some help? Get Doc Samson or something?" Kenny replies with a disgruntled look on his face and says, "They're cool. The pain will ease in a bit. Won't it, fellas? Come on. You're number 1 contenders for our titles. Can't show weakness around the champs, boys. On your feet." Page looks like he's been slapped and says to Kenny, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Kenny just shrugs and says, "I gotta go get ready for my match." Page calls out for some help as Private Party writhe round on the floor after those 2 brutal chair shots from Death Triangle. So this segment getting a 72. Expected nothing else really, but the fact that Hangman Page now questioning Kenny Omega. Wow. And it seems as though Pentagon Jr. and Rey Fenix have a bit of unfinished business with the tag team champions and also Private Party. We'll have to wait and see where this goes. I like the fact that Kenny Omega came out of this looking excellent, as he usually does in all segments that we put him into. As we roll in to our next segment, it's actually the next match on the cards. It's a decent match which the Machine Brian Cage wins against Luchasaurus just in 10 minutes after a drill claw. Imagine Brian Cage lifting up the size of Luchasaurus and then drilling him with the drill claw into the canvas. I didn't really want this match to go on too long either. Two hosses battling it out in the ring. Brian Cage with a 65, Luchasaurus very consistent with his 37's in-ring performance. Again, Brian Cage, ever since arriving, just lost the one match, which was against Cody, that lights out match, but that doesn't really count. I really do want to bring in the power rankings. I'm going to try and aim to do that for after Full Gear, or maybe when we start a new year, 2021. We'll have to wait and see. Up next, in about that, had a decent reaction from the crowd, but terrible wrestling. Nyla Rose defeated Riho in 9:30 after a camel clutch. Nyla Rose was really off her game for this one with an in-ring performance of 29. She really was off her game, because normally she's up there in the 40s, early 50s. That's really disappointing to see. After the match, Nyla Rose has a mic. She goes on to say, "I know you haven't signed the contract for the women's title match at Full Gear yet, Tony." Should actually say the Shida. "I know you want to get back at me for what I did to your little chum, poor old Shida, so face me next week. If I win, I'm added to the women's title match at Full Gear. If you win, which we know ain't gonna happen, then the match goes ahead as originally planned. Face me, otherwise I'll break you." Nyla Rose slams the mic down and then proceeds to powerbomb Riho again, taking her frustrations out on Riho. So I've completely messed this up because it was Tony Storm that signed the contract the other week on Dynamite, not Shida. It was the champion that hasn't signed the contract, that hasn't made it official, leaving it open to a potential triple threat at Full Gear. So if we can just brush over that for now, and we'll try and fix that for the next episode of Dynamite. We're back with Nick and Matt Jackson sitting poolside. Matt is drinking coffee whilst Nick is reading, when a young fan decked in Young Bucks merch comes over and says, "Hey Young Bucks, so awesome to meet you. Look, I was just wondering if I could get a picture and if you'd sign a few things." Matt Jackson, "Sure, why not?" They get up and flank the fan whilst his friend has the camera. The fan says, "You know, I think you guys are great and all, but I can't see you winning at Full Gear against FTR." Matt just stares at the fan. Nick seems as though rage is building up. Matt says, "Now Nick, this ain't relaxing." The fan rubs it in more. He takes off his Young Bucks t-shirt to reveal an FTR one underneath and says, "FTR are the greatest fucking tag team ever. You champs have no fucking chance." From out of nowhere, Nick Jackson hits the fan with a super kick, sending him into the pole. Matt is shocked. Nick turns to Matt and says, "We're going home." Matt is shocked and lost for words. Was the fan a plant? Did FTR want that fan to go and wind the Young Bucks up? That is the question. But I could see Nick doing that actually, and Matt being the one just standing back and like taking it all in, blinking a few times and be like, "Well, what's going on here?" But a decent segment of a 77 as we roll into the next match. It's a decent one. Kenny Omega overcoming Ricky Starks after pinfall with a one-winged angel. Kenny Omega with an in-ring performance of 8-5. Ricky Starks with a 37. We get 75 overall for this match. Kenny Omega looking good out there. When does he ever look bad? That is the question. One of the finest performers there is today. Ricky Starks was penalised for inconsistency. We do have a hot crowd that we're working to here at the moment, so we are getting towards the end of this week's episode. Kenny Omega taking a bit of frustration out as well, as you can imagine, against Ricky Starks after all things that have been happening at the moment between him and Hangman Page, and Private Party as well being in the middle. We then see CM Punk backstage walking towards the entranceway with a smirk on his face, and he's surrounded by plenty of security guards. So we just get a segment rating of 69, doesn't really do much. We just see CM Punk. We know that he's in the arena and that he is ready to come out here and speak his mind about Cody and his upcoming match against at Full Gear against Cody. Penalised for awful gimmick. It's always an awful gimmick for some reason. It certainly wasn't back in 2009. with the Straight Edge Society. You guys remember that? That was just brilliant, those promos that he used to do. Anyway, CM Punk comes out to the ring surrounded by his own personal hired security. He picks up a mic once in the ring and says, "So at Full Gear, in 1 week's time, I'll step into the ring against Cody. A fight for the ages. The biggest match in the industry since the last time I stepped into the ring. Yeah, the environment has changed, but some people certainly haven't. Cody, you talk the big game. You talk about wanting change like you're some sort of messiah, but you of all people have done nothing but hog the spotlight since AEW's inception. You like to talk about egos in this business. Let's talk egos. Let me remind you, you was the one that said back at Full Gear last year, if I lose, I'll never fight for the AEW title again. How'd that work out for you, huh? Be careful what you wish for, because you may not like the outcome. I'll see you next week for the weigh-in." CM Punk drops the mic, drops the pipe bomb. As he gets to 77, he leaves the ring with his security. And that is the end of this week's episode of AEW Dynamite. I think it's been a pretty strong show. Could have been better in places. I felt like AEW in real life, you know, making sure that you start things strongly. I felt we did that perfectly with that, well, the best match that we've had in the series so far between Mox and Janela. But apart from that, I think it went a bit flat towards the middle. If we have a look at we've got an overall rating of 75. If we have a look at the around about midway, having Brian Pillman v Nation, I'm okay with that. I think the Nyla Rose match brought it down a bit. After that, received a 36. But we didn't see any Inner Circle in this week's episode with Chris Jericho. I did find it hard to come up with what we could do next after the showdown that they had with Brody Lee and the Dark Order last week on Dynamite. Hopefully we can sort that out for the next episode. I do actually plan for that story to be quite long term between the Inner Circle and the Dark Order, so it's okay, I think, you know, if we can string it out just a little bit. Anyway, let's go and see how we've got on with the ratings this week. So AEW scored a 2.17 TV rating, getting a total of 1.63 mil viewers. That's not bad. We have had better, definitely. But again, I think that's enough to at least compete with NXT this week. Let's go and see how they got on. So they scored a show rating of 75, so level with us on that, but they did beat us in viewership this week. They scored a 2.35 TV rating and they had a total of 1.8 million viewers, so it's a lot more than what we received. Hopefully things will pick back up again next week. Got good show planned. Well, it has to be a good show. It's the go-home show before AEW Full Gear. That's it for this episode of Dynamite. Hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll see you all for AEW Dark.